All right, your first assignment is going to create a value scale. Now, I know this seems pretty elementary, but I promise you this is the most important skill that you can practice when you're learning how to paint, because most of painting, 85% of it is what you can see and think in your head. The practical, technical skill is maybe 15%. So what this does is it teaches you how to see and compare contrasting shapes next to each other. And I don't want to scare you, but it's a lot harder than it looks. But I'll walk you through. It can be very easy, so I'll walk you through the process. Okay, so first of all, you just need a board. This is just a piece of 1/4-inch plywood that I've gessoed with 1 or 2 thin layers of this Liquitex gesso. You can buy this online. I believe at obviously all the art stores, but you may be able to find it on Amazon. And you'll need this, or you can just get a canvas panel and just tape off a shape. But you need 9 equal squares. 7 is too few, 11 is too many. So we're just going to use 9 for this. And you can see I've got pile of white, pile of black. I'm just going to paint these on either end, and then I'll mix up the middle gray paint and explain the rest of the assignment. Okay, so you can see I've painted the black and the white squares there. And this is the most crucial part of this assignment. We need to mix this middle value, the value 5. And what we're going to do is compare between the black and the white. I'm not sure how this will translate on the video, but I'm going to do the best I can. So the key is you don't just take the same amount of white and the same amount of black. It doesn't work that way. You're also going to need a paper towel to keep things clean so your paint doesn't get muddy. You want to keep this pure black and this pure white, so you don't want to mix this tip of black into your white. Okay, so already you can tell that I've got a lot of black in here. It's going to need quite a bit more of the white value. So I'm just going to set this aside for now while I mix this up. Okay. Gonna scrape up with the side of my palette knife, get a little bit of paint on the end there, mix it in. I think we're gonna need a bit more. You can see I'm using a lot of paint. Here's the thing though, you're going to use this paint. I'm not gonna waste it. I'm going to use this paint to mix up the other values. So as I get into the value scale, I can just use this paint. Like I'm using these as bookends, I'll use this gray. Let me show you right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the white here, black here, right? And then we're going to put the middle gray right here. And then once we have the middle gray, the next value that we're gonna do is the middle one and the middle one here. So this will become a bookend between these two, and you'll be able to gauge what the middle one is here. These two will become bookends with the number 9 and 5 values, and then you'll mix a gray value in between these two for this one, okay? So there's a method to this. If you don't do it in this order, you're gonna mess up. If you try to just go white and mix these gray tones all the way to black, 100% you're not gonna be able to do it. So we have to start with the middle gray and get that middle gray correct. And what we're doing is just observing, is this gray halfway between black and white in terms of how much contrast it has. Right now when I look at this, It looks like it's a little bit closer to the black, but we can't tell just yet. So what we're going to need to do is flatten this out so it's a solid value. Okay, I still got a little bit of white in there. So I'm just going to flatten this out. Then I'm going to take some of this white and I'm just going to bring it pretty close here. So it's almost like I'm doing what I'm going to do on the palette over here, or on the value scale on my palette. So we'll just bring some of this black over. And so this is all so I can compare how much contrast there is. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this, put it right next to that. All right. So what we're doing is looking at the edge contrast between the gray and the black. It looks pretty close. It still seems to me like there's more contrast between the white and the gray. So I'm just going to add some more white to the gray value. And I'm going to pull this away with my palette knife so I don't mess up the little edges. Okay. And by the way, I'm just working on a piece of glass. It's one of the best things to use for a palette. Okay. Yeah, that is looking a little bit too dark. I've done this probably 25 times or more. And after a while, your brain starts to notice what middle gray is. And actually how I'm doing it right now for the video, there's quite a glare. So this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge than I'm used to. But I just want to show you how you do this. This will be the bulk of the demonstration. And I'm just going to talk about how to apply the paint to your value scale and some things that you want to watch out for. So I'm going to hold off. I think maybe just a touch more. Notice when I'm picking up the white, I'm not scooping up a whole pile. I'm adding little bits. And as I'm doing it, I'm looking at the value contrast, how it changes. You can see how it lightens the pile of paint. One thing, don't get impatient and just start trying to mix your values directly on the square. The whole point of this is you mix the pile of paint on your palette, then you transfer it right here to your value scale, okay? So don't just start mixing on your value scale. You've got to mix the solid color here, and it needs to be solid. What you can do, and what students do to cheat, is they'll start painting on here, and to get the contrast between the two layers, what they'll do is they'll make this edge slightly darker and this edge slightly lighter. But I can tell when you do that, okay? Each little swatch needs to be a solid value, okay? So we don't want any gradient on the shape of the square, and your edges need to be equally as clean and crisp, because if you make the edges blurry, then we're not going to be able to see the contrast. So two things to pay attention to. Make sure when you paint, you have a nice clean edge, that each square has the same cleanness of edge, and that each little value shape is a solid value, okay? So no blending within the square and no blending on the edges between the squares. Very important that you do that. And that part of the assignment is where the technical skill comes in. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm just gonna make the swatches next to each other again. And the hardest part, like I said, is you developing the eye to see the contrast between each of these values. Okay, so there's my gray. I may need to squeeze out a touch more white. Oh, by the way, sometimes when you put paint down, it might be a little bit too dry. See how this is like, it feels really dry when I mix it? You want your paint quality to be slightly thicker than mayonnaise, okay? I don't eat mayonnaise, it grosses me out, but that's the analogy people use. It should be pretty creamy, As I drag my palette knife through this, I can tell that it's really dry. So to fix that, what I do is I just take some linseed oil, and I have a thin palette knife here that I just, see if you can see that, I just dip it in there, put 2 or 3 drops into my paint, and then I just mix it up until it gets smooth. On the opposite hand, you don't want it to be too runny. Oops, I do believe I got a little bit of black in my white. That is treacherous. Okay, and to clean my palette off, I just get one of these window scrapers with a razor blade in it. It works really well. Look how well it cleans that off. So I would go down, these are like $3, maybe more, but they're pretty accessible to purchase. Okay, so we're just about ready to put our first value down. The white is feeling much smoother, which is what we want. So I'm going to take the bulk of it and push it aside. And with the edge of my palette knife, I'm just going to bring this over. I want to be very careful that I don't mix it. I just need to see a clean edge. And then let's take some of the black, put it back down here. Okay. Not sure how well this will translate on the video. All right. So that looks pretty good to me. What we're looking at is the contrast between the black and the gray. And the key, if you can't tell how much contrast is, if you just focus your eye on one little area, you're not going to be able to see it. If you blur your eyes and kind of push back like so that you see the whole area, if you squint your eyes or make them blurry, you should be able to see the whole thing at once without focusing in on a small space. And then when you're squinting, you can glance here and here and here and here, and you can see that the contrast is about equal. So I feel pretty good about this. I'm going to go ahead and paint it on this middle square. And let me get this ready and we'll do that next part.